Susan researched and teaches courses in writing, literary theory, animal studies, and plant studies. Her ongoing research focuses on intersection of biological and cultural extinction. She's the author of Love in the Time of Slaughter, Human-Animal Stories Against Extinction and Genocide, Animal Stories Narrating Across Species Lines, and she has published several co-edited volumes, including Posthumanism in Art and Science, a reader, the Palgrave Handbook of Animal and Literature, Human Animal Studies, Indigenous Creatures, Native Knowledge, and the Arts. And the list really goes on. And today she's presenting the paper Pineapple Man, Colonial Novelties and Transplants, Plantation Fruit Fictions. So over to you, Susan.
Muito obrigado, Rafael, and to everyone, thank you so much. I want to start with a slight caveat as well as an assignment for all of you. I will eventually be citing a novel that was published in 1960. The language that I'm citing is distinctly Orientalist, and I'm not doing that to offend, but I do feel like it's necessary to be true to the text, as I hope my talk will clarify why. The assignment for you is my way of dodging the fact that I forgot or didn't quite get around to making a PowerPoint. But I think it will be helpful while I'm talking if you take out your devices and just start randomly searching online for images and whatever comes up when you start looking for pineapples, because I will have a big question for everybody later about that. And yeah, it's very specific to my own particular perspective. I'm tuning in from Maine in the United States, and I know you guys have much broader global footprint than that, so I'm hoping to benefit from that. I'll be talking about one real and one fictional story to trace the parabolic journey of monocropping pineapples in Hawaii. There, the history of the cultivation at scale is a relatively recent, brief, and spectacular failure. At least more specifically, a boom then bust story of a crop for export. I have to add up front that I am an outsider. In Hawaiian, I'm what's called a haole, or you're a white person, and I encourage everybody to support Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiians, in their ongoing struggle for sovereignty. Recent studies note that over half the Hawaiians, half of Native Hawaiians in the state are contributing to the unhoused population there. And that is the fact that half the unhoused population identifies as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, a group that represents only a fifth of the state's total population. So there's a huge disparity there. And it's a problem that stems directly from the creation and current disuse of plantations. 6 months ago, the world gaped in horror as over 100 people lost their lives in wildfires that swept the historic town of Lahaina on the island of Maui off the map. For too many survivors, the nightmare has morphed into an ongoing displacement from what was a rare community for its affordable housing in an area that, like too much of Hawaii, still faces the ongoing risk of still more wildfires that has been exacerbated by the fallow lands that are all that remains of shuttered plantations. Visiting Lahaina as a tourist in 2015, I couldn't help but wonder at all the scrubby, arid grasslands that swept up towards the mountains that were once sugarcane or pineapple fields, and before that had been rainforests traditionally edged by kalo or taro patches and fish ponds. In retrospect, the danger is apparent in the abrupt shift away from intensive agriculture that had been experienced in that region and across Hawaii in previous decades. The last pineapple producer, Maui Land and Pineapple, had by 2009 already followed the route taken by Dole and Del Monte decades earlier in shutting down export operations as unprofitable. I remember thinking their absence bizarre. What is Hawaii without pineapples? My own wrong-headed assumptions are among the many strange outcomes of the uniquely modern history of the Hawaiian pineapple and the complicated stories of multicultural people and monocrop farming that gather along the way. US mainlanders like me have grown up consuming Hawaiian pizza, Hawaiian punch, and Hawaiian salad, only never questioning why the only common denominator among these strange treats is pineapple. Old-timers might have learned from Elvis Presley in his 1961 movie Blue Hawaii to book a pineapple plantation tour, but that doesn't explain why that particular form of agritourism remains a top attraction for visitors to Hawaii today. Instead, many are surprised to learn that pineapples are not a native species to the Hawaiian Islands at all, but rather originate in South America, in a region many of you probably know spanning Brazil and Paraguay. Never mind that uniform fields of them are a recent phenomenon. Although the fruits likely arrived with European seafarers as early as the 18th century, pineapples became a profitable agricultural prospect only in the first years of the 20th century. As part of this transition, the identification of pineapples with Hawaii was secured by a successful marketing ploy. It was actually the first US nationwide advertising campaign at all. It promoted specifically Hawaiian-grown pineapples for a fledgling industry association. These efforts to rebrand the Coconut Islands as the pineapple capital of the world morphed into a series of still more high-profile publicity stunts that were increasingly identified with one particularly enthusiastic early plantation owner, the so-called Pineapple King, James Dole. Plantation culture itself required the application of mid-19th century mining technologies for water bores to tap underground freshwater reserves, and immediately that led to the establishment of vast sugarcane farms. But pineapple production was a trickier venture because it also required the development of cultivars suited to Hawaii's climate, along with the innovation of more efficient preservation methods of industrial canning. Dole's biographers are quick to point to his cleverness in investing in the gincana machine that replaced glass with tin canning as a key development in the rapid rise of his Hawaiian Pineapple Company, a predecessor of today's Dole Food Company. Yet, the most significant factor in Dole's becoming the first to turn a profit in pineapples occurred 6 years before his arrival to the islands, namely the illegal annexation of the Kingdom of Hawaii by the United States in 1893, a political coup engineered by planters from the mainland and led by Dole's own cousin Sanford, who, by the time the younger Dole arrived, was governor of the territory. Acquisition of thousands of acres of land was essential for the meteoric rise of Hawaii's commercial pineapple production from non-existence to world leader in the export trade in just a matter of decades. Success came with heavy prices. Dole's takeover of the island of Lanai alone forced hundreds of Kanaka Maoli to leave the only home they ever knew. Historian Richard Hawkins notes the irony of Dole's name's persistence as a global food brand name because Dole himself lost control of his company in 1932 in what was the American territory of Hawaii's largest ever interwar business failure. More important than Dole's spectacular entrepreneurial failure is the later but equally decisive fall of Hawaii as the leading global pineapple producer. The monocropping story that stems more directly from the intense human-plant relations at the heart of large-scale pineapple farming is what brings me to a prominent fictional version of this story, in which haoles like me and Dole fade into the background. Pineapple production at scale is inherently laborious, with fields that are hand-planted and fruits that are hand-harvested at ground level. The work is notoriously backbreaking. The details of Dole's own racist, paternalistic, anti-union attitude toward the workers on whom his entire operation relied, therefore, would seem to beggar belief, except that for the workers themselves, his enterprise model presented a better alternative to their own horrific exploitation in Hawaii's sugar plantations. Workers imported specifically as sugar field hands, first from China and later Japan, the Philippines, and Portugal, were tightly controlled in long-term plantation contracts that often prohibited them from starting businesses, farms, or any other work. The degree to which the average worker understood what they were getting into beforehand invites speculation. Many were illiterate, but the better wages offered by Dole and the organization of labor that followed were unequivocal, providing the dramatic core of the final section of James Michener's best-selling 1959 novel, Hawaii. Whereas the first two-thirds of Michener's novels are devoted to Hawaii's ancient Polynesian settlement and then to its early 19th century colonization by Christian missionaries, the last section turns to the complexities introduced by a plantation history founded in land theft and human trafficking. Michener adds a further complication to his own fictional pineapple king, Hawksworth Hale, whom he makes not only a descendant of missionaries like the real-life Dole, but also a direct descendant of native Hawaiian royalty. Really strange twist in that fictional version of the story. In the novel, the land acquisitions required to grow the Hawaiian Pineapple Company thereby also foreground the colonial machinations that resulted in the loss of land titles to the vast majority of Tanaka Maoli, and for the dubious benefit of a few. Along the way, Michener accounts for the growing success of the labor movement that eventually priced out pineapple and sugar production by depicting more ordinary native Hawaiians remaining true to the legendary Polynesian spirit of generosity to build alliances with disillusioned Asian contract workers and their descendants. I pause here to acknowledge the trickiness of being myself a Haole literary scholar who is turning to a particularly problematic Haole fiction writer as a main source for critiquing the terrible convergence of historic injustices that contribute significantly to cultural and environmental devastation in the history of Hawaiian pineapple production. The racist premise of the fictions that made Michener's career as a writer, including the Pulitzer Prize-winning story collection that became the musical that you may know, South Pacific. His early fictions of his were famously the subject of his very first conversation with the editor and civil rights activist Mary Sabusawa, a Japanese-American internment camp survivor who was later to become the love of his life. Still more biographical details complicate the story. Their marriage coincided with a career shift toward the intensely researched long-form fictions that was signaled by the publication of Michener's novel Hawaii in the same year as the birth of America's 50th state. Following the years of in situ research together that they invested in preparing the novel, the couple left Hawaii for good once it came out, complaining of the intense racism that they experienced there as an interracial couple. I haven't yet visited the Michener archives to see if there's more to the story, but these sketchy details appear to inform the author's reinvention of the real-life Pineapple King Dole as a multi-racial character who comes to question the terms of white privilege, if not the strikingly weird metaphorical slides between human and plant life in the narrative that articulates this. Cast as a generation younger and given stronger ancestral roots in Hawaii, the fictional character Hawksworth Hale nonetheless experiences similar economic turmoil to Dole's history. Only his persistent interest in plant biology, parasitology, and soil health plausibly enabled the fictional Pineapple King to retain his crown, hanging on to his own company by the mid-20th century ending of the story. Though Hawksworth's enterprises, or through Hawksworth enterprises, readers become oriented to the necessity of investments in plant science and agricultural research to overcoming the many challenges created by monocrop production, including near-fatal mealybug and nematode infestations, and eventually soil depletion of zinc, which is thus discovered to be essential to the farming of pineapples. In the novel, the pineapple blight caused by zinc deficiency coincides with the breakdown of racist barriers to U.S. citizenship for Asian workers and their descendants, developments that Michener blurs through Hawksworth's perceptions. Again, I need to call out that some of these quotes are unequivocally racist by today's standards, and I'm not citing them to cause harm, but to point to the ways in which monocropping becomes an unlikely inspiration for questioning the ideology of white supremacy. Harkening back to his own half-Hawaiian great-grandmother's deathbed prediction to her own Haole husband that, quote, soon our islands will be oriental and there will be no place for Hawaiians, Hawksworth is introduced as suffering from a localized version of the Cold War West's fear of the Yellow Menace. Quote, as thousands of once proscribed Orientals gained citizenship and the vote, and as labor attained fresh power, Haoles gloomily predicted that their day in Hawaii was ended, and no one felt this more strongly than Hawksworth Hale. Earlier readers learn of his fixation with an emergent sociological concept, the Golden Man, a man influenced by both West and East, a man wholly modern and American, yet in tune with the ancient and the Oriental. Again, these quotes are mad. Hawksworth imagines this bright, hopeful man of the future as this unique contribution of Hawaii to the rest of the world. Insisting that golden men are defined more by a frame of mind than racial identity, the cryptic narrator adds to Hawksworth's Hawaiian and European lineage the knowledge of his own Asian, African, and Native American ancestors He's a veritable melting pot. Yet for most of his life, Hawksworth racially was mostly Howley, we hear. And what seems to matter most is that, quote, emotionally, he was all Howley, and he thought of himself in that way. How does this character come to see himself as one among several golden men? It would seem that identifying with pineapples helps. Set in a political landscape of the 1950s that feeds his white displacement fixation, Hawksworth works through the implications of the zinc depletion crisis, first in plant, then in human terms. He tasks scientists with analyzing the soil more comprehensively in order to consider mineral deposits as a metaphorical bank, so that never again we will overdraw our account. Their success in doing so leads to his re-envisioning of the golden man theory via a morphing of the metaphor. Here's an even longer quote. One night, when balance had been restored to the vast plantations and the economy of Hawaii saved, Hawksworth Hale, who had refused to surrender either to nematodes or to the depletion of trace minerals, suddenly had a vision of Hawaii as a great pineapple field. No man could say out of hand what contribution the Filipino or the Korean or the Norwegian had made. But if anyone stole from Hawaii those things which the tiniest component added to the society, perhaps the human pineapples would begin to perish too. For a long time, Hale stood at the edge of his fields, contemplating this new concept. And after that, he viewed people like Filipinos and Portuguese in an entirely different light. What vital thing do they add that keeps our society healthy? He often wondered. I can't help but wonder if Michener himself is also contemplating this question as he was writing on the ground in the run-up to Hawaii's achieving statehood. It seems an important detail also that this final section of the novel wavers confusingly between first and third person narration until the final page, in which it is revealed that readers all along have been privy to the pages of Hawksworth's memoir. And that, if you can bear one last long quote, at the age of 56, I, Hawksworth Hale, have discovered that I too am one of those golden men who see both the West and the East, who cherish the glowing past, and who apprehend the obscure future, and the things I have written of in this memoir are very close to my heart. Michener was 52 when the novel was published, so 56-year-old Hawksworth, kind of close there. And there are other connections to the perspective of the fictional Hawksworth as well. That the novelist himself was an adoptee who knew nothing of his birth parents helps to explain the novel's obsessive detailing of family ties. Almost 2 decades before Alex Haley's novel Roots would turn identifying ancestry into a veritable national American obsession, Michener's Hawaii concludes with Genealogical Charts, an 8-page section of family trees mapping the interrelations of the principal characters across generations that span centuries. But I'd like to conclude by thinking instead of the weirder dimension of things that are, again, according to the narrator, very close to my heart. The rare vision of the descendants of different ethnic groups of foreign farm workers blending into, again, a race of pineapple men, again, might seem just plain weird, the stuff of science fiction. Yet Michener's retelling of the rise of the real-life Hawaiian Pineapple Company concerned the social liberation of migrant workers that he thus identifies with the literal and likewise non-native fruits of their own labor. What is more, the subsequent gains by the organization of the labor movement across racial and ethnic divides would make Hawaiian pineapple, along with sugar monocropping, eventually unprofitable. Their success, as Jonathan Goldberg-Hiller and Noi Silver observe, had depended on thinking with the pineapple and its growing seasons, more specifically staging strikes during the all-important planting season, when the plants and planters' needs for laborers to do the planting coincided. What emerged is also an ecological politics, when the integrated plants and persons in a politically and scientifically regulated plantation society. The pineapple personal is political, not an end in itself, but a developmental phase in the long road to social justice. A complex politics of place and personhood appears to be traveling with the monocropping of pineapples through these stories. The problems of human exploitation and environmental degradation are being repeated in real life in the Costa Rican plantations that supply demand here in North America, where I live. And in Europe, supplies of the fruit are overshadowed by recent news stories of the past year or so of the persecution, torture, and even murder of pineapple thieves on one of the world's largest plantations outside Thika in Kenya. Thinking back to my own experiences of enjoying local cultivars like Maui Gold and Kauai Sugarloaf white pineapples as a tourist in Hawaii, I wonder even more about the true price of pineapple pleasures. While obviously dated and otherwise flawed, Michener's fiction is an important reminder that the history of pineapples, people, and if you can go there, pineapple men, is a moving target and one that builds in critique of the past, present, and future of monocultures broadly writ. Thank you.